So before we left for break, we were talking about finding the largest domain algebraically. But we're going to start from scratch a little bit and just review some of the simple cases. And then we're going to move on to the one or two cases that we didn't get a chance to go through. So let's talk about this first case. You got a fraction there, right? Y equals 5x. What does the word domain mean? Yeah, the x values. And if you have a fraction, what number can't be in the denominator? No, you can have negative numbers in the denominator. You just can't have 0. So, the domain equals all reals. It's just that x can't be equal to 0. Oh, let's play again. This is the next thing that we learned about. We learned about square roots. Now, what kind of numbers can't you take square roots of? Negative numbers? Meg, can we take the square root of 0? Yeah, the square root of 0 is 0. So x can't be negative. Let's write that down. Can't take the square root of a negative number. Can't take the square root of a negative number? Then how do we write out the domain? Any ideas? Meg, what is it? Okay, that's good. All reals x can't equal a negative number. I'm going to write it out a little bit differently. I'm going to say the domain is all reals, and x has got to be greater than 0 or equal to 0. Is that cool? Okay. Then we stepped it up a little bit of a notch. Instead of just having x's in the bottom or x underneath square roots, we had like equations underneath the square roots. Same thing happens though in number 2. What can't the stuff underneath be? Melissa, any ideas? Very nice. Yeah, this stuff over here can't be negative. Well, if it can't be negative, then x plus 5 has to be greater than or equal to 0. And all you do is solve that kind of equation, and you get the answer that x has to be greater than or equal to negative 5. And in fact, this is the domain. Okay. So the third thing that we learned about, I think, before we left was something that looked like this, right? Here you have the combination of a square root and a fraction. Very nice. Very nice, Hannah. It's x has to be greater than 0. Can't be 0 because of fraction, right? Can't be negative because of the square root. And so therefore x has to be greater than 0. Whoops, that looks like a 6. And so that's the domain. Yep, that's the domain. So Meg came up to the board. Let's see if Meg's right. What's the domain of this? Yeah, you got a square root. You got a square root underneath the fraction, so it can't be 0, and it can't be less than 0. It's perfect, Meg. Great job. And finally, we got some new stuff to do. So here I put three new examples up on the board. These are a lot easier than the ones we've been doing. Tell me, does anybody know what the domain is? What are the x values that we could plug into the first one? Can we plug in whole numbers? Can we plug in fractions? Can we plug in 0? Could we plug in negative numbers? Yeah, you could. The domain for this one over here is all reals. Every real number will work for it. How about for number 7? What is the domain of that one? Yeah, it's the same thing again. The domain is all the real numbers. What about for the last one? Good job, Meg. Yeah, for the last one, the domain is all reals again.